Hey everyone, I hope all of you had an amazing day, and for today's video we are kind of all over the place, I would say, because I was feeling a little bit under the weather, or at least not a total 100% the last couple of days, which basically results in me ramping up the scroll-like behavior and not being able to focus on anything for a prolonged period of time. So I was going to build the rest of the Siberian tiger habitat, but because I was not feeling too well, I basically end up with just an empty hallway because I wasn't really that inspired to build that indoor section, and basically I just end up not finishing anything in today's video. We do build or start building actually, the entrance to the indoor section of the Siberian tiger habitat, or basically the entrance to the temple, I would say. And we built a gate to the complete temple area, but as I said before, we're not going to finish anything today. Also, before you guys get down in the comments and say get well soon, I'm feeling perfectly fine now, and it's actually even more fun to make this commentary now because I and you guys get a front row seat into how my brain works whenever I'm not feeling 100%. I'm not saying that I was really sick, it was just a couple of meh days. Like, that's the only sound I can associate with those days, that it was just like meh. So this hallway, not the most inspired building, but I'm going to use this as an excuse to talk about random stuff for the first 7 minutes at least, and probably the rest of the video as well. So yeah, I'm feeling fine today. It just results in building random buildings that we did have to build. It's just that I don't really finish any of them today, and well, you could consider the entrance to the temple a little bit finished, or at least more finished than the rest. And I think the one that we really don't finish today is the gate to the temple area, because well, that's just completely not finished. And this hallway is sort of finished. Probably just need to do the lighting, but I couldn't bring myself to do it, or at least my brain didn't allow myself to do it. But anyway, with that out of the way, I wanted to ask a question that has been somewhat bothering me, and yes, I did hit my mic there. I hope I can get that out of the commentary, but probably not. But something that has been not bothering me, but just I've been wondering about ever since Ozaru dropped, because I know that most of you guys probably found me through Ozaru or like the first episodes of Kayan Al-Bashar, but I was just wondering, well, if you didn't find me through Ozaru, or if you did find me through Ozaru, which video? Or if you found me through some other video, like which video brought you to my channel and what made you decide to stick around? Like, I know for a couple of you guys why you stick around, but I do also know that probably for most outsiders, I probably sound like a complete nutjob because the commentary usually doesn't have any kind of structure. I basically just talk about whatever pops into my mind while watching the footage of the video. So yeah, I just really wanted to know what made you guys stick around, because again, like, I probably sound like a complete nutjob to most people. I mean, I'm not really, like, I would say, conscious about that. I just really enjoy, just like, for me, these commentaries are basically a creative outlet. So I get increasingly weird or just rambling throughout the commentary, and then in, let's say, normal life, I'm a little bit more structured. A little bit. So yeah, just what made you guys stick around, because I do know that most of you guys probably found me through Ozaru. I still have no clue. Like, the first video that I consider blew up, which is the Gharial habitat, I wouldn't consider that the best video of Ozaru. I think I would say the Bengal tiger habitat with like the Himalayan monastery, I would consider the best habitat and maybe a little bit of the better video, but for some reason the Gharial habitat just blew up. I don't know why. So if you found me through that video, why? Because I have no clue why that video did as well as it did. I mean, I understand why, let's say, the cinematic video or the commentated tour did well, because those kinds of videos tend to do better than most, let's say, speed build videos. But yeah, I just really have no clue why most of you guys stick around. So yeah, that's basically the question of today. And again, if I see any comments saying get well soon, again, I'm feeling great now, and it's again more fun actually to make this video today because it's just a front row seat into my somewhat not healthy slash sick slash not 100% feeling brain. But yeah, if you do post a comment of like get well soon, then I'm going to be disappointed. Like, I can't put really any consequence behind it, but just know that this girl is going to be disappointed. Yes, this is going to be a fun or weird video today. But anyway, I should probably talk a little bit about the building, but I really can't say much about this hallway because, as I said before, it's a little bit of an uninspired build because, well, I was just not really getting any inspiration for what I was attempting to build. So basically I just abandoned it 7 minutes into this video, so we are close to abandoning it. But yeah, the hallway is really just there to serve as a way for the Siberian tigers to get to the indoor section of their habitat while not being like completely like front row seen by the guests. And because I just wanted to have an actual function to the, well, was basically the treasury of Petra rebuilt in Planet Zoo. And I think it's called the Alkazna, yeah, let's just call it the treasury of Petra. So I was actually correct on that in the last video where I did say like, I think it might be a treasury, and then I looked it up and yes, it's actually a treasury. But yeah, we are close to actually going into the second build of the day, which again we are not going to finish because, let's say, just screw my somewhat sick slash not feeling 100% brain for finishing anything today. But I basically built my version of the treasury of Petra, or at least I built the entrance to the actual temple, which ends up looking like you need to sacrifice your sheep, goat, maybe first child and entire family to get entrance, because I mean, it doesn't help that the references that I looked up for the entrance to the temple were dark temple or shadowy temple or just dead temple or ruined temple, so it didn't help for like the intimidation factor. However, we do end up with some, I would say, shrines, or at least type of structure that could be used as a shrine, and it's up to you guys to determine, do you think that they would be used for just sheep sacrifices or actual human sacrifices? Yeah, I'm not worried that my videos will be flagged as like for children anytime soon, because I'm literally now talking about human sacrifices, so yeah, maybe that's where the shepherd is gone. Like, he just, well, let's just say, ended up in a bad place. Maybe a good place. We don't know how benevolent the Jinn are. Maybe they have like a complete afterlife set up for whoever they, well, thinking that the Jinn are basically transformed into tigers. Maybe they have like an afterlife for anyone they eat. I mean, I don't have a set restriction on how powerful the Jinn are. I just think they are basically what keeps Kayan Al-Bashar floating. So yeah, now I'm building those like shrine-like things. And as I said, it's somewhat of a copy of the treasury of Petra that we built in the last episode. However, with my own little, well, changes and transformations to it, just to make it a little bit more impressive. But you will see in the overall structure that it's kind of similar, because actually I looked up like all the structures in Petra, which is a little bit difficult because really, like I said in the last video, that if you look up Petra, you really most of the time only get that single picture of the treasury of Petra. Like, the rest is not that well photographed, I would say. But some buildings actually look like almost complete copies of the treasury. So I think that the treasury was basically used as like a blueprint for a lot of other buildings. Like, we still do that today, where if we, let's say, have a very iconic or very well-loved building, sometimes we just end up copying that building non-stop with just minimal changes because we know that it's a building that we like. I mean, yeah, we tend to do that actually. Like, think about all the churches that kind of look very similar. I think lately I have actually looked up a lot of churches that look almost like complete copies of the Notre Dame. And yeah, it's just like one style, one building, and then they just copy it around with minimal changes or changes depending on situation, location, and such. But yeah, so the entrance to the actual temple is very similar to the actual treasury of Petra, or just the entrance to the gardens that we built in the previous video. However, I would say it's less inviting. Mostly actually because it's just, whenever you increase the size of a building, for some reason, especially with, if you, let's say, increase the height of a building, then it just becomes a lot more intimidating the more you add on the height. So I would say this is, I think, the most, well, not the most inspired building for today. I think the gate that we are halfway through by the end of the video is the most inspired building, because that's just pulled out of thin air, actually built without any references. Well, actually, I did use the reference of the Gate of Petra, which basically is just a few pillars that remain. So not much to build upon, but yeah. But for the actual entrance to the temple, I really like that it looks just really menacing when we get to the end of it. Actually, when we get to the end of it for today's video, because again, I'm not going to really finish anything today. So yeah, that's just the way things are today. However, with the temple, as I said, it really is going to look like you need to sacrifice your goat or sheep or entire family to get anything. And what I just imagine for, let's say, the Jinn is that they are a bit of like a reclusive, well, people, race, slash just thing. But that they do grant, let's say, wishes or prophecies, which, of course, knowing just prophecies and wishes in general, are going to just completely ruin your life. Let's say for a couple of people, it will probably work out well. And then because it works out for those couple of people, more people keep coming to, well, get, let's say, wishes done if they are, let's say, in a particularly bad place or just doing really badly, let's say financially. Then they go to the temple, make some sacrifices, and probably end up screwing themselves over because they sacrifice too much or something like that, because there's always some cliche morale behind every kind of like wishing or prophecy and such. Like, I really, like, it would probably be even weirder if everything was like completely fine when it comes to wishes and such, but I just imagine that the Jinn, like, sometimes they are in a good mood and they do benevolent things, but most of the time they just want to be left alone. And then most of the, let's say, work on the temple, let's say, I would say maybe like upkeep and such of the garden and the actual buildings, it's probably done by priests who try to keep the Jinn peaceful, I would say. So I do later on build the gates to the actual temple area, because I do imagine that the temple is pretty much its own entity. It's not really dependent on the village. More so the priests are dependent on the village because they are actual mortal beings who need to eat, and the Jinn probably don't need to eat. Also, quick to note, I do this actually quite a lot, where I place the unfinished building on the location that it's in. Well, I didn't do that with the Treasury of Petra because I had no clue where to place that for the longest period of time, but whenever I do know where I need to place something or where I want to place something, then I usually really, well, a lot of times just separate it from what I'm doing and just place it in a location just to see how it looks. So with the temple, I realized that I made the entrance a little bit too, well, deep, I would say, so it would overlap with the part inside of the temple, or what's in zoo terms, the indoor part of the Siberian tiger habitat. But I mean, I really like how it ended up being. And I did not build the rest of the temple on screen because, as I said, it's pretty similar to the Treasury of Petra. So if you really want to know, like, oh, how did you build it, I would recommend going to the last video on Kayan Al-Bashar. But for now, we are basically building, I would say, the balcony for the temple, which needs to be, well, functional more so than intimidating. And really, like, it wasn't really the main thing that I wanted to do with, like, building an intimidating temple. Like, that intimidating part was just a nice addition to it, but yeah, it just ended up being like, yeah, you need to basically sacrifice your firstborn child or something like that to get entrance, because it looks just so intimidating. Or at least for me. So I do plan on making like an after video views when the entire temple is finished. I didn't do that for the last couple of videos because I just thought there was too little progress to actually make something worthwhile to watch. So after the temple's finished, which is probably in 2 episodes, I would say, because I do consider the, well, outside area. So we now have these floating, well, rocks connected by bridges, and then we have one island before we get onto the island of the village. I do consider that one island before we get to the village also part of the temple area, I would say. I mean, the gate to the actual temple sits upon that area. However, yeah, it's going to take a lot longer than I actually thought, but I think that's just a given with anything I build. However, piece count, not that much of a problem. Actually, lately my Plan Zoo has been running even more smoothly because, well, I basically reinstalled Windows because, well, I was sick, but I can't stay in bed for an entire day. I go crazy whenever I try that. So I basically reinstalled Windows, and I don't know what was going on, but Plan Zoo has been running smoother than ever before. So I don't know what happened, but somehow reinstalling Windows fixed something. However, I do still sometimes have crashes, but I think that's just not really Plan Zoo related, but more my video card being a general brat. Because, yeah, that video card that I have, for some reason, just doesn't want to do anything. Or at least it wants to do much, but it just has moments where it's just like, I don't want to do anything. Let's just crash the entire PC. Yeah, I need to get that fixed, but I might do that later, because so far, it's going alright. So, that's probably not healthy to keep doing, but yeah. Anyway, would set that today's video at any structure? Yeah. Again, if you guys are saying like, get well soon, I'm going to be severely disappointed in you guys. Yeah, I can't really put any real consequence behind it. Also, yes, the balcony is sticking out from the main rock. Or at least, well, a few of these, well, most of Kayan Al-Bashar is going to be floating. But especially in the Mirage Mountains, there are actually mountains that are connected to the ground. They are basically pillars almost, because they are, well, when you think of a mountain, you think something that kind of spreads out at the bottom, or where it connects to the, well, normal ground level. For the Mirage Mountains, they are basically spires, because they don't really get that much wider the lower you go. So, yeah. Also, I made fire. Or at least attempted to, because we don't really have any fire effects in-game. So I made fire with the torches that we got from the Arctic pack. So yeah, the Arctic pack is actually getting a lot of use in Kayan Al-Bashar, especially in the Mirage Mountains, because wood is just the most plentiful resource, I would say, for the Mirage Mountains, and also a very cheap resource probably. But yeah, I made fire. I don't know why that's such an accomplishment, but yeah, I just stuck a bunch of those in these, what would you call these things actually? another question for you guys. What would you call these things? Because I have no clue what they are called. I do know that they are something, but I have no clue what. But yeah, I just built fire because I want fire effects. Because, well, especially with, let's say, fantasy zoos, like I get in a realistic zoo, animals, fire and gas don't really mix well, but in, let's say, a fantasy zoo, fire is usually, let's say, if you want a medieval or just anything old-fashioned type of zoo, fire is usually pretty useful. Unless you want to make, like, let's say, a very futuristic zoo, because, well, then you actually, I think, have almost all the tools you need right now. But for, let's say, a fantasy zoo or something like that, or, well, Kayan Al-Bashar, I don't really approach it as a zoo. I approach it more as, let's say, a fantasy realm, and the animals are just an afterthought. But, yeah, for futuristic zoo or realm, you probably have most of the tools already, but for anything, let's say, ancient slash medieval inspired, you don't really have much. So maybe, like, for the next pack or something, a little bit more of those pieces. I mean, let's just also put stained glass in there, because I made an entire video dedicated to stained glass. But yeah, so I also made a frozen waterfall, which basically means building one sheet of ice, or like those, I think they are called icicles, stalagmites, or I don't know. I never really called them by the English name, but basically I made one sheet of that and then copied around parts of it so that it's different everywhere, but it all came from the same, let's say, origin. I did the same with the rocks enclosing Ozaru actually, where I basically just built one template and then just copied parts of it around so that every part looks different, but it all comes from the same origin, I would say. And I do this with all the waterfalls I'm going to build for the temple, and I really actually like that. To get to the actual temple, there is a frozen waterfall, and I actually am planning on making it so that the lowest part of the waterfall actually has water coming out of it, because of course the lower you get actually in Kayan Al-Bashar, I mean also in the real world, but specifically in Kayan Al-Bashar it's a very drastic change, but the lower you get, of course the warmer it's going to get, and ground level is basically just a blood scorching desert. Yeah, that's the only reason actually why the Mirage Mountains are, well, snowy and such, is because they are, well, they are not the highest up, I would say, but they are, for just Kayan Al-Bashar purposes, they are high enough that anything, when it comes to water, just almost instantly freezes up here. And I mean, all of the mountains actually, like, you might have already seen it, but if you look at the heat map, it looks kind of weird. But also everything is like, let's say, a minus 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, because I never use Fahrenheit. I mean, I'm Dutch, we don't really use Fahrenheit anytime unless we really need to. But yeah, so everywhere in the Mirage Mountains is freezing. I mean, well, I want to say that, but there's also a weird thing that has been happening with the snow, which is basically that whenever I zoom out or just am in some angle, the snow gets kind of blocky, I would say, where it basically just removes the snow in one area, or at least visually removes the snow. Whenever I change the angle or something, the snow is completely good again, but I have changed all the settings in the graphics and such, but for some reason the snow is just blotchy, I would say. But anyway, to the actual gates, because I do consider the temple just a complete separate entity from the village, so this gate is not really there for defense. However, I did add that defensive factor because it's just like, well, the entrance to the temple is very menacing and intimidating, which you're going to see whenever the temple is finished. But I just thought, like, maybe just because, let's say, the Jinn are not the most benevolent of, can you call them spirits or just entities? Let's just call them entities. But yeah, the Jinn are not the most benevolent entities, so they try to, you know, only want you to go there if it's absolutely necessary. Unless you're, let's say, I think maybe the Sultan, maybe they would kind of not appreciate but tolerate him coming more often. But yeah, maybe actually the Sultan is a Jinn himself, but I'm not going with that too much. But yeah, I just wanted to have that intimidation factor and then now level it up or ramp it up to 100. So I am going to make it as realistic, I would say, as possible with, let's say, meticulations, just the entire crenellations and such. So that's an actual, let's say, realistic gate, but it's not really there for actual defense, it's just there as an intimidation factor. Let's just say, because the temple's completely self-sufficient, or at least the Jinn are, the priests, they probably don't really care about that, but if, let's say, the temple ever got under siege, I don't think the Jinn would really care about the priests starving, but the Jinn themselves probably don't really need, let's say, food or something, like the sacrifices they get, or the, yeah, sacrifices or offerings they get. It's probably just more of, let's say, amusement, or just to generally keep them happy with, let's say, I don't know, gifts or something like that, let's say gold or something. But yeah, they don't really need the offerings, but they just, yeah, they tend to kill you less when you give them. Don't know why their offerings are there, maybe for some sinister reason. I literally said that the temple really looks like you need to sacrifice your child or entire family to get entrance. Whenever the temple, let's say, gets under siege, as I said, and you can see it in the background, there are multiple bridges to the temple, so the Jinn could probably just blow up those bridges or blow up the entire island connecting the temple to the rest of Kayan Al-Bashar. As I said before, I don't, or at least I haven't really put much thought into like how powerful the Jinn actually are. I mean, I did say that they are probably the reason why Kayan Al-Bashar is either floating or is stable while floating. Let's just say whenever a siege happens or something like that, they probably either just completely obliterate the besieging party, or they just completely isolate themselves. And then, yeah, they don't really care about the priests. I mean, they care a little bit probably more about the priests than, let's say, anyone actually visiting, but let's just move on before I get too much into, let's say, just giving up on some people, or at least on their priests. Anyway, so I wanted to also make a portcullis. So for some time I was looking for like an iron portcullis, or at least just, yeah, I think you call it a portcullis, where just the thing drops down, and in most movies they have like those pointy edges at the end because that's going to kill someone when it falls down, like in most movies where there's a siege or something that somehow kills someone. But yeah, in the end I did end up with a wooden portcullis, but then just very well fortified, or at least a lot of layers of wood. So there's just the normal planks, and there are beams, then there's this lattice work, I would say. And then there's more beams, and then in the end I did end up with well, they are not the pointy ends on the, well, lower side that actually goes into the ground usually. They are there, or at least there are extensions there just to pay homage to, well, that. I'm really curious, like, if you, well, lowering this thing would probably be able to go quite fast because you just need to release it. But raising it, just don't know, it just looks heavy. I mean, it's supposed to be heavy, but this one especially. Like, those iron ones usually look a lot lighter than whatever I'm building now. I mean, I like what it looks like, but it looks just so heavy. It looks so unnecessary for some reason. It looks pretty, but completely unnecessary. But then going into basically hiding the flaws, because whenever you can't make something look good, just hide it behind some kind of detail and pretend that it's supposed to look like that. because the arch of the gates, I did not know how to properly make that work, or at least the upper side of the arch. I basically added, I would say pillar, or just another, it does have a word specifically for it, but I kind of forgot what it is. But yeah, I basically built this extension to the gate, and it's just there to hide some of the unfinished edges. As you can see here, that like the upper side is just open, so I built an extension to the actual gate just to hide it. And then I made it functional with, like, I think you call them murderers, but on the underside of the gate, or at least the underside of that extension, I basically put windows so that if there's any besieging party right at the gate, because then you don't have like a field of fire anymore, or they are outside of your field of fire, because you can't really just shoot straight down if they are, let's say, walls or defensive things have, let's say, an extension. Without matriculations, you don't have like a field of fire, well, 180 degrees down. Basically, that's where the murder holes are for. Just so that you can drop things or shoot things through those things, so that if someone is right at the gate, you can still kill them. Yeah, it's kind of realistic. Also, completely useless, because I don't think that the Jinn really cared too much if you besiege them, because I don't think you would win. Like, I think if the Sultan would go to war with the Jinn, I think he would lose drastically, because I think the Jinn are really the ones that keep Kayan Al-Bashar floating stably, or just floating without just all the islands falling down. So maybe if an island is falling down, or a floating rock falls down, the Jinn just don't like you. Also, for some reason, I want to build a graveyard. Don't feel attacked by this, but Marinari, I'm probably mispronouncing your name, but for some reason I want to put you in the graveyard. Like, just a story of like you being in mourning for the first version of Kayan Al-Bashar, that you just somehow wasted away and now are in the graveyard somewhere here, somewhere in the Mirage Mountains. I don't know why I want to put you in there, but for some reason I want to do that. I also want to just put a reference to the first version of Kayan Al-Bashar, because it was a journey, I would say, the first Kayan Al-Bashar. But anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. There was not really much structure to today's video, but I want to reiterate the question that I had, which is, how did you guys find me, and why did you decide to stick around? And with how did you find me, I mean, like, which video did you, well, first watch? And also, don't put any get well comments down below, because I am perfectly fine now, and this was probably one of the most fun videos to make, because there was completely no structure that I had to keep in mind, just random talking all throughout. But anyway, again, that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do, I hope to see you back in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video, because it does help out a lot. And I wish you all an amazing day. Bye bye!